Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Susan Lopresti Wellness, Mind, Body, and Soul, the podcast where we explore the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to a woman's life, her health, and all aspects of navigating the midlife landscape. I'm your host, Susan Lopresti, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. And today, I want to talk to you about a very important topic that I myself struggle with all the time. And it's something that I think a lot of us are struggling with, especially in these trying times that we're living with in this day and age, right? And that is fear and also anxiety. So I want to talk to you about anxiety and fear and what it's all about. And let me give you some statistics, first of all. Over 40 million people in the US alone suffer from anxiety-related disorders. And that's according to the ADAA, which is Anxiety and Depression Association of America. And this means that 18.1% of the adult population will experience overwhelming fear and dread associated with anxiety at some point in their life. And that is just so sad. And let me be totally transparent with you. I suffer with it myself. I'm very fearful to be in big crowds because of somebody shooting off a gun. I am very fearful when I drive. I have anxiety when I drive because I live here in New York and everyone is a crazy driver, and the highways are like a speed racer thing, and people are in and out, cutting in and out and cutting you off and riding up your ass. And it's just an incredible thing. And I struggle with it myself. And so, I'm not just here to talk to you about it, but it also helps me as well. And fear as a concept might seem like a similar sensation, but it's generally considered that anxiety is used to define an ongoing sense of dis-ease, right? Or worry about areas of life that may not present themselves as threatening or immediate danger. And then fear is what you feel in a scary situation, a sudden jolting of somebody like coming up from behind. You jump, you get scared. It's a debilitating reflex response. Anxiety is less noticeable. It really is. And it's recurring. So anytime I get into the car and I'm driving, it's a recurring fear, but it's anxiety driven. And ultimately, that can prove to be quite more problematic in the way it interferes with everyday life. And that's what it is for me. Because when I know that I have to go drive somewhere, I think about it and I analyze the route. What's the best route to take? Where is the less amount of traffic? Could I go without getting on the highway? And then I'll put in my GPS. I will actually put in my GPS the address and then put avoid highways. And I see like it could be an hour and a half versus maybe 40 minutes. And sometimes, depending on the highway that it's telling me to go on, I'll drive the hour and a half to avoid that. So the impact of both fear and anxiety can happen on all areas of life. However, it's not until we do a little bit of reflection and introspection that we realize that anxiety is a compilation of fears that we're unable to acknowledge and also effectively express when they present themselves to us. And I'm going to put some links in the show notes with a lot of this information. So let's talk about the biology of fear. So what happens to your body when you're afraid? To begin with, let's talk about the physical aspects of the emotion of fear that we all are accustomed to experiencing at some point in our life. We've all had it. We've all been fearful of something. The commonly observed sensation of fear occurs in response to an external stimulus and causes the amygdala in the brain to release a hormone that's called cortisol. And I've talked about cortisol a lot. Cortisol is known as the fight or flight hormone and is what causes our body to respond unconsciously and elicit anticipation of danger or attack from an external source. From the amygdala, cortisol then travels to every muscle in the body and causes them to activate and tense up in a fear response as the unconscious physical body prepares to protect itself from the attack. Physically, cortisol increases the release of glucose to the bloodstream, primarily as a way to increase energy levels in the immediate response to a dangerous stimulus. The trouble with this in today's age is that not every stimulus presents a real danger, meaning that the glucose which gets sent into the bloodstream remains unused and over time can really build up. So let's talk about the fight or flight in the 21st century. The trouble with this fight or flight reflex action in today's society is that the fears that we have evolved to protect ourselves from have also evolved. Where once, when our ancestors were triggered to run in flight from immediate life-threatening predators, like an animal, let's say an animal was chasing them, a tiger, the response would happen and they would run to safety and climb up a tree, and the animal would say, okay, forget it, I'm leaving, I'll go look for another piece of meat to eat. And then you went back to normal and you came down from the tree and you went on with your normal day. Today's reality is not quite as dangerous usually, but cortisol is released in everyday situations which are not life-threatening. So dreading a work meeting, anticipating spending time with family that you don't usually get along with, or let's say taking public transportation and the train breaks down and you're late for work and you're getting all stressed out because you needed to be there today at 9 o'clock and now you're not going to get into the office until 9:30. Our bodies still respond to these situations in the same way as they did back then, using excess amounts of energy as we enter into this protective mode. The human body hasn't yet learned to differentiate between the dangers of, let's say, getting hit by a car or being chased by an animal and failing an exam. Both things elicit the same response in the brain, and as such, our bodies are overstimulated and they're flooded with unnecessary hormones. The result? Unnecessary and also unhelpful levels of stress. So what's the lesson here? To first forgive your body for its evolutionary assumptions. It's not your fault that these responses have become routine. The reality behind our fear responses is that we must train our minds to react differently, to notice when you feel anxious, and take an honest look at the situation and then decide if your body's reaction to it is justified or not. And this is the beginning of letting go of your fears. And I'm going to put some links in the show notes about just that. This is why stress, anxiety, and unprocessed fears can actually be the root of many physiological issues, such as, believe it or not, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and so much more. Another function of cortisol is to assist the body to regain homeostasis after a period of stress or imbalanced release of hormones. Let's go on to talk about rational and irrational fears. And how do you know if your fear is ruling you? And I struggle with this because I feel that at certain times in my life, fear does rule me, and fear is what's behind some of the decisions that I make. So if you follow the guidelines set in the last post that I just talked about and acknowledge the truth about fears, noticing them for what they really are, we can begin to differentiate between rational fears versus those which are not. Usually, there is some form or some sign letting you know if your reactions are exaggerated or not. And so it's essential to remain aware of your surroundings for this reason. Be conscious of your interactions with others during a period of so-called fear. Are you creating tension where tension is not called for? Have you created rifts or noticed a shift of the positive energy of the interactions you use to take for granted? Get curious about your fears. And if you feel comfortable to do so, ask those that are closest to you to help you to identify common patterns. Often it's other people who notice our patterns first before we even do. And so if you're really struggling to do so, difficult as it may sound, it can help to talk. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes about why opening up about your mental health issues is so vital to your recovery. And now I want to get into that it is within our power to make the changes, right? And the answer is yes, you can make those changes. The main problem is that this question often comes up during the power struggle between maintaining and releasing control of fear. Our own capacity to change is infinite, and it's vital that we assess this potential if we truly want to start not just living, but thriving. Start to take notice of some of the following dialogue and see if you notice if this has wormed its way into your personal dialogue. So things like saying, I'm not capable. I'd love to, but I couldn't. That's not something for me. I'm not able to. If any of these little dialogues sound familiar to you, you may need to change the inner dialogue that surrounds your fears. Can you relate to any of these statements? I know that I certainly can. So we need to learn to release and accept. The most important thing to consider when you're seeking to let go of any fear is to fully acknowledge it for what it is and how it has formulated in your mind. Only by familiarizing yourself with the fear can you hope to overcome it, right? And sometimes the fear happens because you were in a situation that really brought a lot of fear to you, and then you want to avoid that same situation at all costs. ever again. And that's not always possible. So here are some steps for releasing fear. The first and foremost is that you need to acknowledge the fear. You need to know what you're afraid of. And then you need to learn to release the control that's surrounding that fear. And then you need to decide which action can be taken to overcome it. Take this action to make the change a lasting change. Put all your effort, all your energy, and concern into creating and maintaining that change. Simply writing this down, taking an objective look at the role that fear has been playing in your life and how it's holding you back. That's one of the most effective and lasting ways to make changes in how you perceive and deal with fear. I want to talk to you about yoga and meditation. It's not just a fitness trend. There is so much to be gained from practicing yoga and meditation regularly that the mental health benefits often get forgotten in favor of the more immediate, visible, and obvious physical benefits that you get from yoga. Any of these practices are derived from ancient teachings, spanning centuries of knowledge that's been passed down from teacher to student, with the ultimate goal of realizing our true nature and calming the mind to prepare for a stable meditation. Does this sound like something which allows for fear, anxiety, and fluctuating moods that accompany them? No, I don't think so. Many people report feeling lighter and more themselves, and I put that in air quotes for you, after practicing yoga and meditation. The good thing about this is that it allows us to cultivate a more stable foundation for all difficult emotions, not just fear and anxiety. From this stable base, we are less susceptible to succumb to the onset of fear and anxiety. It doesn't mean that it won't occur, just that our capacity to deal with it becomes stronger. And if you're interested in learning more about this, I'm going to put a link in the show notes about that as well. And you know, some of the best advice that I've been given and that I want to share with you here today is live in the now. It's often said that depression occurs when we live in the past, and fear and anxiety occurs when we try too hard to live and predict the future. And that's what happens to me when I know I have to drive somewhere. I'm predicting what's going to happen. And I just need to learn to live in the now. So this episode is really talking not just to you, but I'm talking to myself as well. And living in the now becomes an almost impossible task when we're always trying to predict the future, right? So an impossible task, which is necessary if we are to truly let go of fear and release ourselves from its grip for good. And through various practices like meditation, like mindfulness, and other creative pursuits, you'll find a noticeable difference in the capacity that you possess to stay present. Making this a priority as you move forward in your life has also proven to be extremely useful in fighting symptoms of other mental and physical illnesses too. And I have an article about that as well. And then I want to talk to you about gratitude, because gratitude is a practice that, like meditation and yoga, can have a very powerful and immediate effect on us. The area of the brain which is activated during a practice of gratitude are the same places that are associated with the release of dopamine, that pleasure and happiness center of the brain. By drawing awareness back into the present moment and away from those perceived fears, those stories, and those mental meanderings, gratitude has the capacity to bring an anxious and a fearful person from a bout of uncontrolled anxiety back into the present moment towards contentment. It really can be that powerful. This fantastic capacity to have both an emotional and a physical response in the body is part of the reason why gratitude is so powerful. It is an all-around healing tool for releasing fear, anxiety, and negativity. And if you don't believe me, I'm putting a link in the show notes to prove just that. I want to now go on to talk about the flow state. There's a state of consciousness that's known as the flow state, which is characterized by periods of intense focus and undistracted concentration on one specific task. And studies have shown that those who spend more time in the flow state experience lower levels of anxiety and fear, and so it can be very effective in a way to manage your fears and anxiety. Many artists describe their most profound artistic insights as stemming from a state of flow. And it's also known to be a period of low emotional fluctuations, where the areas of the brain associated with learning and happiness and positivity are active. So the conclusion to this is, in order to experience what it's like to let go of fear and reduce anxiety, we need to spend more time in flow. So what does that mean for you? Flow looks different for everyone. For some, it could be more obvious creative pursuits like writing or journaling, singing, drawing, painting, maybe playing an instrument. But these are definitely not the only ways. Absorbing activities like gardening or going for a walk or a run, reading, cooking a meal, a healthy meal, I'll say, cleaning, and even just being fully absorbed in your work for a period of time are all ways that you can spend time in flow. The trick is you need to find what works for you. And so I'm putting a link that you could go back and look at that. And then let's talk about trust and control. Sometimes the most effective way to let go of fear is to simply let go a little bit and learn to trust a little bit more. It has been proven that fear and anxiety regularly stem from a deeply ingrained need to control our environment and a fear of trusting it. The reason for this is that anxiety thrives on the possibilities of failure and disasters that it finds in every given situation. Even if there's no apparent threat, anxiety will find the worst case scenario in everything and zoom in on them. Does that sound familiar to you? While being aware of this is very helpful, it's not always enough to combat the intensity of the fears. Building self-trust is essential for this. I'm now going to get you through some helpful ways to encourage your sense of self-trust. In what areas of your life do you feel that you lack trust? There's a couple of areas in my life where I feel that. So honor your emotions. Self-trust is only established through having a real and honest connection to your emotions, honoring emotions when they arise for precisely what, how, and as they are can be a difficult task. Release the need for others' opinions and approvals. Many of us seek approval from our peers, from our family, our partners, simply for the rush of dopamine that it provides. Identifying this kind of pattern can be hard to admit and face, but will ultimately strengthen your resolve in the long term. As we honor our feelings, be it crying when we're sad, expressing gratitude when we're grateful, or allowing an emotion of admiration to surface about someone that we love, we create a safe space for that emotion to exist. Reducing the resistance surrounding it creates a nurturing space for that emotion, just as we would cultivate a safe space to nurture a child. Our feelings must be acknowledged, they must be supported, and given the opportunity to grow. By doing this, we can really begin to allow the problematic emotions and begin the journey towards moving past them. In terms of fear, often just acknowledging the presence of fear is enough to lessen its intensity. And I've worked on this when I've been in the car. And I'll tell myself, Susan, you're just fearful right now. There's really nothing to be fearful of. Just relax. Enjoy the ride. Look at the trees, look at the scenery, listen to a podcast. Just relax and just be within yourself. And sometimes it works well. And sometimes I need to continue talking to myself until I reach that destination. It all depends. I want to also talk to you about the power of silence. How many of you are guilty of filling a fearful silence with excited, irrational speech or actions which don't actually lend themselves to your goals? They neither fulfill your desires, nor do they solve or support your fears. Sometimes sitting in silence with anxiety and fear can prove one of the most daunting tasks in the world. And this is precisely why it's so important. By allowing fear the time to settle, it becomes clear in our minds, and we can more easily put things in place to combat it. This isn't an invitation to block it out and ignore it. It's actually the opposite of what I'm talking about. Stillness forces us to deal with fears and starts from a place of stable awareness to change them. Meditation, again, is an excellent tool for this, as is mindfulness, breath awareness, or even just taking time to be by yourself in nature. And I find for me, nature is the most healing and I don't even know how to describe it sometimes. It just changes everything in me. When I go into nature, I just feel like the energy just drops. And I just get this sense of calm and peace. And I feel in oneness with the surroundings. I feel a part of it. And nature is all about peace. And when I'm feeling anxious and I'm just not feeling too good about myself, I go outside and I take a walk and I go down by the water and I sit there, I close my eyes and I meditate and I get into mindfulness. And that's what I want to talk about next. The practice of mindfulness involves remaining present and mindful in the moment, no matter what the situation is around us. And again, this is easier said than done, especially if we are used to letting the monkey mind take over and lead the way instead of sitting with the emotions like fear, like anxiety, or even resentment. A lot of times, if I resent something that happened, I play it over and over and over in my mind, and I become the victim. And then I have to ask myself, am I enjoying this? Like, why am I doing this to myself? And you will find by merely returning yourself to the moment and ensuring that you remain present instead of drifting into imaginary thoughts and what ifs and conversations that you want to have, you will begin to see your fears in a very different light. So try the following steps. Notice the way that your body might react physically to external triggers. Figuring out our triggers in this way is crucial to gaining the freedom from fear and anxiety that we all seek. Notice the small things around you, the beauty in nature, the sounds in the distance, or the basic bodily sensations that we usually take for granted. This is all mindfulness. This is becoming present. By doing these things, we become able to turn our fears into beneficial surges of energy, which can then be used to our advantage. And that's really all we want. I want to talk about loving kindness meditation. We've already discussed the benefits of meditation for releasing fear and anxiety. However, there are specific methods that can specifically benefit anxiety and fear more effectively than others. Loving kindness meditation is exactly what you'd expect it to be. It's a way for us to direct our attention and our awareness back towards a part of us, which is comprised predominantly of love, kindness, and acceptance instead of fear. And making the shift away from fear and towards love is hugely beneficial. Focusing awareness on our heart during meditation and repeating a heart-centered mantra draws our attention away from the threatening side of experiences and towards the positive, life-enriching aspects. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes about just that. So stop indulging your fears. It's funny how we tend to indulge in the things that least serve us, right? Why do we do that? When it comes to fears, letting the imagination run away with us and staying in a negative cycle of fear-indulging habits is the main issue we find ourselves stuck in quite often. When you observe an emotion, fear, or sensation, it's up to you to figure out how you're going to deal with it. Indulging in the sensation will strengthen it. Allowing it more time and energy when you know it's damaging is probably the worst thing that you can do, right? So why do we do it? The hardest part of all of this is that the only way through is to be strong and not let it take charge. Take note when you start feeling fear and anxiety. Ignore it. Choose another outlet for it to be expressed and let the fear go. So if you feel fearful, go take a run. If you're not able to run, go take a walk. Go ride your bicycle. lift weights, do something to get it out, release it. And the next thing I want to tell you is stop waiting for the right time. There's never going to be a right time. Many of us allow fear to dictate very important decisions in our life. We long for the clarity to know exactly what the outcome of everything will be, resisting to take action until the right time presents itself. Unfortunately, this will often lead to the indulgence of fear and the lack of taking action ever in our life. It will cripple us. The reality is that the right time may actually never occur, and waiting for it might end up postponing our lives and prolonging the states of suffering that really need not be endured. In short, waiting for the right time means that the fear wins. Do you want this to happen to you in your life? If you're serious about combating fear and releasing yourself from anxiety, it's time to take action, to act against the limiting beliefs. What will you do to take action? I'm going to put some links in the show notes again about that. And the root causes. Many modern holistic medicinal approaches like functional medicine will advocate the importance of accessing the root causes of illness. This is because there is simply no point in treating the symptoms of any illness, be that mental or physical. Modern holistic medicinal approaches like functional medicine will advocate the importance of assessing the root cause of an illness. This is because there is simply no point in treating the symptoms of any illness, be that mental or physical, with drugs or other prescribed methods without addressing the cause. By treating symptoms, you reduce only the symptoms. In discovering the root cause, you can easily get to the bottom of these root causes and remove them for good. Or at the very least, help yourself or a loved one to become aware of what's truly the underlying fears and anxieties. Do you see the difference? We don't just want to put a Band-Aid on your symptom by giving you a drug. We want to get to the root cause. And once you get to the root cause, then you can eliminate it. So you see the difference? The same goes for fear. You can't possibly hope to remove the fears for good without doing a little bit of inner work and seeking to acknowledge what may be the reason or the origin of the beliefs behind it all. Functional medicine has so many benefits by itself, not just for healing anxiety and fear. It's definitely worth learning more about it. So I'm going to put a link to an article which describes very well the basic principles of functional health. And I will tell you that I have 2 autoimmune diseases, and I work with a functional medicine doctor who has truly made a world of difference in my health and how I feel. It's been life-changing, and I highly recommend that if you're struggling with any kind of an emotional or physical illness, that you should really, especially if you're not getting to the root of the problem and you're going to doctor upon doctor and not seeing a change, you should really consider seeing a functional medicine doctor. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the language of emotions and emotional intelligence. Expressing emotions does not come easy for everyone. Emotional intelligence and the language of emotions refer to becoming skillful and aware in the way that we experience and express emotions on a regular basis. How often have you heard phrases like, I'm just stressed out, or I'm just really tired? Those are used to cover up sensations of fear, anxiety, or other related issues. It's one thing to use these words as an excuse not to talk about the root cause of an issue. It's another thing entirely to believe them as fact. Becoming emotionally literate is really vital if we are to begin to take control of our emotional state and let go of emotions that no longer serve us, like fear. Quite often, it's not a case of emotional illiteracy, merely that many of us require a safe space in which to express these feelings. And I'm going to put a link about that as well. So learn to let go. Letting go is truly the only way to assess unlimited contentment and satisfaction in your life. Whether it's fear, anger, love, hate, any example of intense emotion can be hugely impacted by cultivating the ability to let go. Letting go doesn't mean ignoring your difficult emotions. Letting go involves an intricate process of looking, acknowledging, accepting, and moving through your difficulty to truly process it and assimilate any important life lessons you will undoubtedly learn from it. When it comes to fear, the processes might differ slightly from those involved in letting go of, let's say, unrequited love or even grief. And each fear within this sphere will vary. Sometimes it can seem like the most reckless thing to do, but ultimately, letting go helps us to cultivate a sense of inner strength in ourselves and trust in the world, which allows for greatness to manifest outward. So, are you ready to let go? I hope that you are. And I really hope that this episode benefits you in some way. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You could go to my website, www.susanlopresti.com. From there, you could schedule a free 30-minute health assessment with me. You're under no obligation to continue. Now, I'm not a therapist, but I am human like you, and I struggle myself with fear and anxiety. Sometimes it really takes control of me, and I work on it every single day. So maybe just talking it out with me and sharing your experience and me sharing mine with you could make all the difference in the world. So don't hesitate. Don't be shy. Don't feel that you're the only one going through it, because you're not. Believe me when I tell you, you are not. I speak to so many people that struggle just the way you are. So thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it, leave me a comment. If this is the first time that you're coming to my channel, please be sure to subscribe, follow me here. And until the next time, I just want to say, be well, stay happy, and bye for now. Take good care. Thank you so much for listening.